we truly find our inner purpose, like we all come here on earth for a purpose, and we come as a perfection. You know, all little children are children of God, and they're all perfect in their own little way, and they're little angels, and they're full of love. And we know our purpose at that time. But then what happens? We get influenced by our families, our parents. We get influenced by society. We get influenced by the people we hang around with, what's accepted. We become programmed, as you can call it, and we conform to what society wants us to be. And I tell you all these things out of experience. I'm 48 years old, and I've lived a crazy life. I've had a lot of things happen, just like life happens to everybody. But I've always chosen to get up. The first chapter of my life was very difficult. My first 13 years of life were extremely difficult. And I experienced things at an early age, and I realized that I had to either, just stay there or overcome them. And I'll share a couple of things because I believe that God lets you have choices, and we make choices in our life. And sometimes we choose that path, a negative path. And sometimes just we are born into it. We are in something that we have no control over, especially being a child. And that happens around the world. So I'm no one special. But the things that happened in my childhood made me realize that I had to get up. And so I'll give you some history about myself, and then we'll go on, because we're all, and the reason I share my stories is because we all have a story. And in order for us to help each other, we have to kind of share these stories. We have to understand that we're all human, and sometimes people just portray a certain person. They act like nothing's wrong, especially on social media. It's easy to kind of fall into that and just put all these positive things. And in all reality, life is difficult and things will happen, but it's how we look at it, right? So again, I need to share my story so you can understand where I come from. I've been extremely transparent most of my life. I want to say most of my life because, again, as a child, when you are brought into this world, you're perfection, and you know your purpose, and you know your true happy self, and you're made out of love. But then life happens, right? And life pushes you down, and we make these choices out of anger and out of being hurt. We don't make choices out of love anymore after you're hurt, right? And that's what happens to most people. They start building these walls. But originally, we're all beautiful. We're all perfect in our own little way. Like, it doesn't matter where you're born into, whether you're, a Christian, a Muslim, a Mormon, what race you are. It doesn't matter. We're all children of God, because at this point, guys, we're all a big old mix. I mean, just in my bloodline, I have Jewish, I have Asian, I have French, I have Spaniard, I have, of course, Central American, Mexican, so we're all this big old mix. Some of us not as mixed as others, and I'll get to that in a second, because so we're all the same. We're all children of God, and we're all perfect little angels until life gets us, and then we start to react. And most of us, and I know I did it, most of us learn how to fight back. My mother always taught me, and again, you got to understand my mother, where she came from. She came from just hearing these stories about Jesus and about God, and how God would tell you, if someone slaps you, you just give them the other cheek. So I was taught that way, right? Growing up in Inglewood, California, that was a little difficult because fights were happening all the time. So me giving my other cheek meant I'm going to get beat up. So yes, I was bullied at school growing up because I looked different. I looked different than everybody else. I looked Caucasian, I guess, even though my First language was Spanish, and I didn't know a word of English until I went to kindergarten. And I was the baby of 8. And I have siblings that are 20 years older than me, 18 years older than me. So they were like all out of the house, and I was the last one there. And so my mom would dress me like a little American doll, like my friend Gabby, that I've been friends with her for 40 plus years now. She always not teases me, but she reminds me. She's like, you used to go to school dressed like the American doll in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s in Inglewood, California. And it wasn't because they were putting these beautiful dresses on me and they were expensive. No, my mom would make me this clothes. So I would stand out. Not only did I look different, I looked like Shirley Temple. I had these like curly blonde hair. And then she would put these dresses on me. So of course I would like stand out. And the majority of the people in Inglewood at the time were either African American, coming from like very close. This was again in the late 70s. So all these children were like recently, like they had stories about their grandparents being in slavery and how they would be racist within themselves. They would say, oh, I'm Creole, I'm light skinned, and there would be racism within themselves. Well, I experienced racism within myself because I didn't look like a Hispanic or a Mexican, because I would always identify myself as Mexican, but I would look different. So I was very grateful because, again, we have angels throughout, the world. And I was very grateful that God put people in my life to protect me, literally. Again, my friend Gabby and her entire family. They were a little rough around the edges, and they were in the gangs and stuff. Some of them, not everybody. And so they would protect me. Because let me tell you, I got beat up a couple of times. And again, my mother taught me, they hit you on one side, you got to give them the other cheek. And I remember being 7 years old and some girl just like sat on me. I was a little kid. Being a teenager, I got thrown into the dumpster by some gang members, and they wanted me to conform and to fight. And I didn't fight, and I was always against, what was around me. It was easy to be in the gangs. It was super easy. And it was actually difficult to say no, and I chose to say no. And things were crazy back then because it wasn't just like a physical fight, and it was just their hands. The girls would put their hair up, and they would put razor blades in their hair. So if you would grab them by the hair, you would like cut yourself. I grew up in the time where gunshots were normal. People doing drive-bys was like completely normal. And so I experienced feeling different, and I always used to dream, and I used to dream about being in a completely different state. And when you grow up in the hood, you don't see nothing. My parents never traveled other than, hometown Mexico and coming to the United States. I was the first generation here, the first person here when it came to my siblings. So I would dream a lot, and that's super important now, I understand, because I would dream about this life and I would daydream. And now I understand that if you just foresee it, if you just envision yourself in a different way, you can do it. The universe, God puts you there, right? But it took a lot. It took a lot because after going through so much growing up, I became really, really hard. And I'm a tiny little thing. I'm 5'3", and I didn't weigh more than 110 pounds until I was 30 years old. After that, I gained weight, but I was always this tiny little thing. So I learned to fight back, and I realized at that moment that having money was, or what I thought having money was a way to find happiness, because it would give you opportunities to get out of the hood, And so I always worked. I started working when I was 13 years old, and that's a story in itself. But I would get up at 2:30 in the morning and go to work with my mom and go to school in between, and then come back and work again in the evening. So I did that for a long time, and then finally I had my daughter when I was 18 years old, and she was actually my purpose, because for a long time I just felt like I could just, and we all do this, especially as moms, we're like, as human beings, we're like, I can take it, but then when you see your child in a situation, you're like, no, I don't want her to be in that, but she's the same, she's a part of you, right? So for me, it was the switch that clicked in my head, and it wasn't about just making money for the moment, because I was always in that, growing up in the 80s, there was like these little dance groups, and there was a lot of girls that would be in like these dance groups and I was part of those dance groups as well, but instead of trying to dance and do the break dancing and all that, I would be the one setting up these actual dances and charge people at the door and make a profit. So I was doing that since I was 15. So I was hanging with the guys from like the get-go, because I realized really quickly, my mother showed me that it was a man's world, and in Mexico, women had no rights. My mother didn't realize she had any rights until she got to the United States. So she would always, tell me these things, and so I realized that nobody was going to save me, that I had to save myself. So I thought that saving myself would be doing it financially. And again, I was in a man's world. Again, I'm like this tiny little thing, and I must tell you, of course, it was difficult, because guys would try to come on to you, right? Because for some reason, people think that you have to have, being the opposite sex, that there has to be a sexual energy involved if you care for the person. That's not true. Or if you have any sort of relationship, that there's something there because you're the opposite sex. Which I was just around the guys all the time, because they're the ones that were doing the businesses, right? And I was always like that. But I learned again at an early age that I could put a stop to, I could let it go as far as I would want it to go. In other words, if somebody would approach me, trying to do other than my business at the time, whatever I was doing, I would always put a stop to it. But again, I was growing up, and I was just going with the flow, and that would get me in trouble, because I was always with the guys. So I would always have somebody trying to beat me up because they thought that I wanted to be with their boyfriend, and I was so far from the truth. Again, after I had my child, my daughter, it was a motivation for me to get out the hood. And I quickly got married, and I was married for 10 years. And I thought that was it. I thought, this is my life, and it doesn't matter what he does. It doesn't matter anything. It doesn't matter if I'm happy. This is what it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to get married and have kids, and that's it. And before I knew it, I was just like everybody else. I had to really look at myself and be like, who is this person? Because I did what everybody else wanted me to do, and I didn't even know who Nora was. I had to literally break her down and start all over again, because I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who I was. I was conformed to what society wanted me to do. And when that happens, you can't find your purpose, because you're living for everybody else. You're living for everything except yourself. And you're so involved in the outer that you forget about your inner self. I was very curious on my life. And again, I daydreamed a lot, and I dreamt of my life being a certain way. So I was always looking for a way out. And because I fell so many times growing up, you get back up, because life happens, Life throws you on the ground, you got to get back up. So it's like the more you do it, the easier it gets to get up. And one of the things that I came across, one of my friends gave it to me like 17 years ago, was the book, The 4 Agreements. And it was something so simple to grasp, but it truly made me look at things differently. The very first thing is be impeccable with your word. Why your word? Because our words can be spells. If you tell someone they're ugly, they're gonna believe it. If you tell someone, Oh, you know what? Like, I'll give you an example that this book gives. You know, a little girl singing, and the mom had a really rough day. And instead of saying, like, baby, go in the room, or I don't know, something, or you have a beautiful voice, or encouraging the beautiful child, she was like, I can't, I can't hear you right now. You sing horrible or something. The little girl never sang again. Like that example, right? So the very first one is be impeccable with your word. Really think about what you're going to say before you say it. Think. That's why God gives us a mind, right? Think from your heart. And it's not so much like really like writing out what you're going to say, but if you focus it within your heart, then you're always going to be right. You're always going to say things out of love, and you're not going to hurt anyone. But it has to be focused on love, right? So not fear, not anger, but love and compassion, right? And the second one is don't take anything personal. And this is so easy for everybody, Someone says something to us and we think it's directed to us. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know what they've been going through. That's their perception of things, not our reality, right? And the third one is don't make any assumptions. Don't come up with conclusions. Ask questions. Ask everything. And the last one is always try to do your best. Always. And I implement that even in my book where, in my life, it's try to do your best and know that you did your best. And tomorrow will be better. Be able to look at yourself in the mirror and really look at yourself and say, this is me. Be real. Be transparent. Be who you are. Forget this facade. Right now, people are having so much of a hard time right now. Why? Because they, like they say in the saying, right? You made your bed, now lay in it. They made these choices because society was going to make it look nice, right? Or because we were going to be accepted by society, or we were programmed to be a certain way. And now when we're home with everything that we worked for, our family, our children, not a lot of people are doing so well. Because they're living for someone else. After we get out of this, guys, it's going to be different. Because no one's even going to want to be too close to each other. But we can actually connect on a different level. We can connect spiritually, because that's what we are. We're beings full of energy. We don't have to touch each other. We don't have to be sexual. We don't have to have that sexual tension, right? Because so many people, and again, I go back to me having a job of a man, right? Because I own a bail bond company. I've been around bounty hunters. I did my own recoveries. I did all of this stuff in a man's world, right? So many of the times these people that I worked with, these people that became my partners, just because I was nice or because I was kind, they would think, oh, she wants to be with me, or let me see if I can be with her. And that's not what it is, guys. It doesn't always have to be that. I love so many people, males and females, and it has nothing to do with the sexual energy or the touch. It's a spiritual thing. I feel connected to the world. I truly care for humanity. And of course, just like there's good, there's bad. So you have to pick and choose who you surround yourself with as well. We all make choices. We all have to make choices. And that's what it comes down to. Because me growing up in the hood, I could have easily gone the other way. I could have easily gone into drugs. I could have easily been on the streets being a prostitute. That was normal. I could have done it all. I could have conformed. But I chose not to. And I chose to do the opposite. And I'm no one special. It's just about making choices. There's a study that they did a long time ago, and they always bring it up. Identical twins growing up with a mother and a father that are addicts, right? And identical twins, they each made their choice. One became an addict and the other one became a doctor. And they both had the same reason. When asking, why did you choose this? They said, oh, well, because I had to. My mother was an alcoholic or a drug addict, so I had only that choice. Or I decided I could not be that way because it was so in my face. To me, that's the choice that I chose. I saw people, and back in the day it was crack cocaine in that time, and I saw people how they looked and how they reacted, and I didn't want to be that. And so again, I chose the other way, and there was a lot of daydreaming within all of that, meaning I would always be at school or be at work or whatever, and I would daydream of how I would want my life to be. And so that's why dreaming is amazing. We need to visualize it. Techniques that we can help out is having like a vision board, and really focusing on what you want. Another thing that I wanted to touch real quick, people are always telling you you're doing something wrong. Oh, you can't do that because you're so-and-so, or you're doing it wrong. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're a New Age, or whether you're a Mormon, or whether you're Indian, people are always trying to tell you how you're supposed to do things. Well, how about trusting yourself? Trust yourself on what you need to do. Read, look at your history, do your own research, and you will find your purpose. You will find the right answer for you. But in order to find your true answer for yourself, you have to get away from all the distractions. The physical distractions, those energies, the food, all the crap that is in the food. It's time to eat real food. That's why this is happening right now. God's giving us this opportunity to learn how to cook. There's no freaking excuse. There's videos all over social media. There's videos all over the internet that you can come up with anything to feed your body, your temple. I'm telling you that it doesn't matter what anybody says. At the end of everything, it's either you're making a good decision out of love, or you're being evil and you're doing something negative. It's a choice. I know people around the world. I have friends that are Muslims, Christians, Indian, Native Americans. I have friends around the world, and they are all want love, security, and peace. Ultimately, that's what they all want. And we have to understand, again, we all come out of light. We're all this beautiful light of energy, right? We're these babies. And I have an example like this. This is a plant, right? This is a live plant, and it's producing a little flower. It's beautiful, right? And it has energy, right? And we're made out of energy. So us being those children of God, these lights, other beings, other people that are doing dark things, negative things, look at this little flower and they want to pick it. They want to grab it, and they want to keep it to themselves. And when you do that, when you cut this flower, it ends up dying. Or you can leave it there and you can admire it, and you can water it and nourish it, and it'll be there forever, right? So that's like a beautiful example of how we are. Like, we're supposed to be who we are. That's why as a child, you're supposed to let your child have an imagination and play and just be silly, because that's what we are. We're happy beings. It's not until after someone tries to pick our fruit or ourself, and start to damage it. And most of the time, those people that are doing that is because they've been programmed to be that way. And it doesn't make it okay, because again, we have choice, but we have to understand where it comes from. So I believe that by sharing stories, by helping each other, we can grow as humanity and out of love. There's so much confusion right now with everything going on. Is this religion correct? Is it the end of times? Is it this? Is it that? How about just stay still? Find your own research. Stay in your own self, in your own temple. God wants you to have that straight connection with Him. And that connection, He lives within us. But we can't find that light until we spark it. Sometimes it takes someone to spark it. Sometimes it takes a book to spark it. Sometimes it takes, a conversation, maybe this video, but something has to spark it, because the light's already in there. It's just been dimmed by all the energies that we've taken on throughout our life. So again, life is going to be different. We don't have to be physical. We have to be there with love, with emotion, and really get back down to what Christ was about, what God is about. That's what I follow. I don't follow any religion. I don't believe in religion. Religion was man-made. They did it to control the mass. I get it. We're powerful beings. I believe in love. Always, if you do things out of love, you're always going to be right. And it's about doing the right thing for humanity, for us. We're all connected. Do your research. We're all connected. And if it's not by blood, it's through marriage. It's through learning that we all have feelings, that we need to be compassionate, and that it is our duty as human beings to help others, because we can always help people and we can always receive help. So on that note, I hope you guys have a great Monday, and I hope this helped. Remember that you can make a negative into a positive. It's all up to you. It's in your hands. It doesn't matter what religion you come from. It doesn't matter how you grew up. It doesn't matter if your brother, your mother killed your brother, like that story from Gabriel Hernandez, one of the #1 Netflix right now. Gabriel Hernandez, right? Where the mother tortured and killed her own blood. Does it mean that her other kids have to be that way? No, it's a choice. And that's why I'm telling you, it's a choice. It doesn't matter what it is. We can turn a negative into a positive. I'm going to give you one quick example before we leave. I know it's already going to be done, but when I went to Switzerland in January, in the mix of all this, I went to a castle, the Castle Gorier. Now that castle was, here's a picture of one of the depictions that they had in the castle. It was, see if you can see it, that there was kings and queens. It looks like Atlantis. Basically telling a story that there's been kings and queens and societies before us. And in that castle, it used to be called the Castle of Saint Germain. Saint Germain is you can look him up, but he is basically trying to connect you with God. He's like, if you Google him, you'll find out that he's like the I am. I always say you have to do affirmations. So basically, he has been a light of, a person that's always tried to tell you that you have to have your own connection. Just like Jesus, when he came on earth, he was trying to tell you just to have, that the church wasn't a building, the church was a community, right? And that God lives within you. You don't need any outer nothing. It's all within yourself. So Saint Germain was the same thing. Well, that castle was named after him. And he was also the founder, or one of the founders of the Templares, or what they called the Templares, which protected the blood of Christ, the people of Christ, right? His followers and the traditions. Well, this little town was owned by this family, and they named it that because they signified love, right? So what happens after the 13th century, or the 3rd century, sorry, the Pope orders all the Templars to be killed. So on Friday the 13th, he ordered everybody to die, and he disappeared. Again, this is an actual person, Saint Germain. And everybody ended up taking off. Well, guess who bought the castle? I'm talking about hundreds of years later. It ended up being bought by the designer or artist of Alien. So that's the guy that did the artwork for Alien. His name is H.R. Geiger. And his art, he was inspired by Egyptians. When he was a kid, he went to Egypt, and he was a high society of people in Switzerland, so he came from a lot of money, and he ended up going to Egypt and being extremely intrigued. Now you got to remember, Egypt was ruled by the gods on earth, the fallen angels from the Bible, or descendants from them. So they were known as walking gods, the demons, whatever you want to call it. Remember, words are just people that agree that this is what we're going to call it, right? So people can call the same thing different things. They can call the fallen angel, the demons, the aliens, whatever you want to call it, but that's what they were. And so he was inspired by that. And what was that? The story is about the Egyptians that or the rulers, is that they brought technology and also brought all kinds of really gory stuff, how to have abortions, all kinds of craziness. So what did this guy grow up and do? Well, he grows up and becomes this artist that does the most horrific art, and I get it. You know, I went into that museum because I had to see it firsthand. This is one of the things that you see as soon as you walk into the museum. And now parts of the museum, you have to be 21 because it's that gory. So these are a bunch of little kids, little babies, like attached to something, super gory. And then he has females in every kind of depiction doing things with animals and machines. Really, really crazy. So again, what did he do? He ended up buying the castle, something that was so sacred and out of love. And he turns around and he puts his museum there. And his museum is called the Pit of the Beast. And it's super horrific. Like, I'm going to show you this. The castle was made with 2 seals, right? Because there was no cross, no nothing, because it wasn't about worshiping anybody. It was about good and evil, right? So the 2 seals were one seal with a bunch of angels that were women, and it was love, and it was all beautiful, and I'll share that. I'll add it to the video. And then the other side were all demons. And so basically the castle was, again, it wasn't about religion or anything. It was about good and evil. That's it. You choose, right? So he buys this castle. He ends up putting his museum there. And he's owned it for 50 years now. Well, 54, because he's already dead. He died about 4 years ago. He didn't have any children. He ended up buying the museum, kept it for 50 years. And now, when you Google the Gorier Castle, guess what comes up? It only comes up his name. Like, you really have to go in deep to find out really what that castle represented. So for 50 years, he was part of the elite group because he made the movie Alien. He was in the elites. He was part of the elites. He was part of Hollywood. He won a Grammy. He actually dated Farrah Fawcett from Charlie's Angels. So he was that group. He was part of all those elites, right? And so he buys his art. He buys the castle, ends up putting all his artwork in there. So now when you look it up, it represents evil. It represents horror instead of good and love. So, I mean, things can get switched up all the time. That's why forget the rules. Forget about all these other people trying to tell you, do this and do that. Follow your heart. Do things out of compassion, out of love. Not fear, not hate. Really look at yourself. Because we can all, it doesn't matter what bloodline we come from. It doesn't matter who you are. It's a matter of choice. And on that note, I am going to let you guys go because I can go on talking forever. This is another crazy picture I'll show you guys real quick. And it's basically representing one side evil, one side good. The good side has Jesus. The other side has Hitler. Real quick, before I forget, Hitler is on the evil side, right? So Hitler, he's direct lineage of the royals. He's actually direct lineage of the husband of Queen Elizabeth. So, yeah, so good and evil. So it doesn't matter where you come from, because look at Prince Harry, he ended up leaving. He made his choice. He has royal blood. And so it doesn't matter what you come from. It's about making choices for yourself. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you really take a look at yourself and get rid of all the excess, because remember that things that we put in our body can really confuse our mind. So that's why we really have to get back to eating from scratch and eating for purpose, because remember, that's the key, doing things for purpose. So on that note, I hope you have a great week, and remember, Easter's coming up, and Easter is about celebrating that that there is hope and there is love. So on that note, bye-bye. Have a great day. Bye-bye.